Welcome everybody to this new GigaOm webcast. Today we will talk about how to choose your next HCI solution. I'm your host, Enrico Signoretti, and today with me I have Greg Theriac, Director of Project Management at Scale Computing, and Rod Ahrenstorff, Partner and VCIO at KT Connections. Hi guys, how are you?
Doing well, thanks for having me.
So just to start the webinar with a little bit of background, as I said, I am Enrico Signoretti. I'm a storage analyst here at GigaOm, and I cover data storage and lately also cloud storage for this research firm. And with me, Greg and Rod. Greg, maybe you can give us a little bit of background about you and Scale Computing.
Yeah, sure thing. So Scale Computing is a hyperconverged infrastructure company. I've actually been with the company for, gosh, I was just looking at it, almost 10 years now. So been here through the very first definition of the product on the product management team of what we were bringing to market with HC3. I was even kind of around whenever the term hyperconvergence was originally coined, kind of going back to 2012, 2011 timeframe. Originally, when we came up with that, the idea was to differentiate between hypervisor convergence and what at the time was converged infrastructure. So I think now it's kind of taken on a life of its own and simplified to HCI. But yeah, that's kind of my history and the history of Scale of the last 10 years or so.
Very good. And what about you, Rod?
So I work for KT Connections. I'm one of the business partners there. We are a managed IT services provider in Western South Dakota. We address probably 350 small to medium-sized businesses every year with different IT solutions. We are obviously a Scale partner. I have been using their product for a number of years now. And we've been in business for over 20 years and employ approximately 33 people as of today. And happy to provide some answers today during the webinar to our audience.
Great. In fact, I'm very thrilled to have you guys both here, because having the point of view of the vendor, but also from somebody in the field that meets with a lot of customers that have real world needs, will help us to understand better both the technology as well as the different implementations. So without any further ado, let me talk about the agenda. So this webinar is divided in a few sections. Okay, we will start talking a little bit about HCI in general. So we will give 30,000 feet overview. Okay, it's 10,000 meters, and I am a European. So, and then we will talk a little bit about the important stuff. So what you give for granted from every vendor. So, and it's important because you don't want to mess with details about things that everybody does. And now we are talking about mature features and capabilities that more or less do not have an impact on TCO, return on investment, on your business practices and IT processes. Okay, but then we will focus on the key criteria that are necessary to evaluate an HCI at the end of 2019 and the next year. Okay, and we will finish with giving a few hints on what is going to happen next. I mean, in the next 12-18 months. So after that, we will have a Q&A session. So you are invited to interact with us. Send questions through the panel that you will find probably on the right of your screen. So they go to webinar panel, and we will answer at the end of on this session all the questions. So first of all, a short poll just to understand a little bit where we are coming from. Okay, so why are you evaluating an HCI solution? Why you're looking at hyperconvergence? So The answer are, I want to simplify my IT infrastructure. I look for something that just works, easy to manage, I mean. HCI is of help in the transition to hybrid cloud for me. I'm not sure yet. I'm evaluating different options, or HCI is just on fashion. Okay, so please answer to this question. A new pop-up came out, so you have the possibility to interact at answer. We will share these informations very quickly as soon as we got all of them. And so guys, while we are waiting, so if you look at these possible answers, Craig and Rod, what your customer are looking for as when they start talking with you?
This is Rod, and I would say simplify my IT infrastructure is one of the leading principle or guide points for our customers as they're moving away from complex virtualized infrastructure solutions that they've had for maybe 8 to 10 years. And that's been a real proving point for scale computing.
And Craig?
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, the common things I hear are, I'm looking for something I can just set up and forget about it. I'm tired of babysitting my infrastructure. I want to move on to the applications in my environment and start providing business value back to my organization, that sort of thing. And that all wraps up in, I think, those first two answers.
Okay, very good. So the answers are trickling in, and a few more seconds, and then we will give you the outcome. Here we go. The majority of the answer came in. Okay, so everything is there. Oh, this is strange. I mean, let me see with our technical help if something is happening. Okay, let's proceed, and maybe we will find later what is going on with the poll mechanism here. Okay, so let's talk about HCI infrastructure. Okay, what is an HCI infrastructure? There are some basic concepts that I think that are defined today an hyperconverged infrastructure. First of all, we have a bunch of servers, usually x86 servers, and each one of them with an hypervisor. An hypervisor is just a mechanism to virtualize the resources that are available in the physical system. Okay, they are connected together usually with virtual switches, so that you can bring all these servers with virtual IP, virtual network interface, and create all the network layouts that you need to work. And on top of it, there is a distributed storage layer. Okay, this is distributed storage layer provide the data storage services for your VMs in the cluster. Okay, so all VMs share are accessible practically from every single node. So they live in a physical node, but they share this storage layer that is installed in all the nodes. So this means that this is a scale-out architecture, okay, meaning that to expand the architecture, to expand the cluster, you don't add additional resources on each single node, but actually you add additional nodes. Okay, I don't know, guys, if you want to comment on this. This is very straightforward. It's the very basic of HCI.
Yeah, I think the only comment on this is the virtual SAN layer. A lot of times people will call it a virtual SAN, and what they mean really is just, as you said, the distributed storage layer. But SAN oftentimes will imply more traditional storage protocols that may or may not exist depending on what HCI solution you're looking at. But yeah, in general, this is definitely the layout, and the benefit, of course, being that scale-out nature, being able to tolerate node failures, drive failures, all the fun things that happen with infrastructure.
Yes, of
Yeah,
course. The storage layer. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll add one comment, and that is the virtual SAN layer often includes some sort of orchestration virtual machine that has to run on each node in a cluster. And one of the nice things about the scale computing platform is that it's actually built into the kernel. So there is no orchestration virtual machine. It's all built in. Helps to provide additional resources.
Yes. So just to explain better, there are some different implementation of this distributed storage layer, depending on how the vendor decided to implement it. You can have a virtual machine that runs in each one of the servers that provides this service. Okay, of course, this uses more resources because it's a layer with a system operating system on top of it that provides additional services. While if implemented at the hypervisor or at the kernel level, okay, you don't need this operating system, you don't need all these resources, so it's very lightweight and potentially brings you more performance. Okay, that's the main difference. Okay, let's see what HCI can do for you. Okay, we started, as Greg said at the beginning, like 10 years ago or so, talking about HCI and the different aspects, the simplification of the IT stack. Okay, so at the very beginning, we started with VDI and with a lot of workloads that are very, very common in every organization. So we started with the consolidation of several physical servers running databases, email servers, ERPs, business intelligence, and whatever you have in your organization, and they were consolidating in this infrastructure with virtual machines. So it was a further simplification of a virtual infrastructure. Okay, at the beginning, of course, for several reasons. Okay, big data, HPC, meaning high performance computing, and machine learning, all very compute intensive workloads that needed a lot of capacity, were not very good for hyperconvergence, for two reasons. One, the type of infrastructure that we had at the beginning were very rigid. I mean, each node in the cluster was identical to the others. Okay, and that means that you can prepare a cluster that is on average good, but actually when you talk about this kind of workloads, you are not you do not have the average capacity or the average CPU. Okay, and on the other side, there are workloads that need maybe not a big capacity, but a lot of transactions and a lot of throughput. I mean, edge core applications, for example, IoT, and all the transactional workloads that you can think about. And in this case, especially when you go to IoT and edge application, building a small hyperconvergent infrastructure to deploy in a remote office, to deploy in a remote location, usually is a little bit expensive. Okay, yes, of course there are exceptions to this rule, and in fact hyperconvergence is growing in popularity in every type of organization, so small and large organization, but also in the number of workloads that are supported. So again, I want to ask you guys your opinion on this, because I'm seeing a lot of end users asking for hyperconvergence at the edge, for example, or using hyperconvergence for everything, because they don't want to manage an hyperconvergent infrastructure for some applications and a legacy, even if it's virtualized, kind of infrastructure for the rest of their applications.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. I mean, I want to say, when we first started, we were one of the only organizations that didn't focus on VDI specifically. It really wasn't until recently that we really had VDI integrations with some of the major players out there. So for us, the standard server workload has always been our kind of standard workload out there. And at the time, actually go back 10 years ago, people were running, Exchange and that sort of thing. It was really any application that required high availability was kind of the target use case for us. And now I'd say that's really expanded to any application that needs to be managed with, the least amount of resources as possible. So that does qualify for edge, where a lot of times there's no on-site IT resources. It qualifies for small and medium-sized companies that are may have 1 to 5 IT admins that are generalists, or even larger enterprise-level organizations that are just looking to kind of redeploy the resources they have in other areas of the stack.
Yeah, and I can follow up on that. Our real world in the field experience more or less covers that center section there. We've got databases, email, ERPs, some business intelligence and VDI deployments. And as far as edge goes, we're starting to see that creep into our market, even though we address mostly small and medium-sized businesses. If they've got distribution sites or things like that, where we need some applications running to support, distribution through trucking or things like that, the small single node or 3-node cluster made up of smaller units to provide high availability has worked extremely well. And we're starting to see that definitely creep into our marketplace.
Fantastic. Okay, so and how you do evaluate an hyperconvergent infrastructure? Okay, usually at GigaOm we build these key criteria reports, and for each one of them we divide the feature set that you can find from every vendor in the market in 3 sections, in 3 groups. Okay, one is table stakes, so everything you give for granted from everybody. Okay, and this is something that is really important, because you don't want to waste too much time looking at something that should be there. Okay, no matter the solution you will choose, it doesn't make any difference for your TCO at the end, or it doesn't make any difference on the return on investment, or how easy it is for your administrator to manage the infrastructure. Okay, but actually you want to focus on the key criteria, on the key features, on the key functionalities that will make a difference. Okay, that will simplify your life, that will simplify the infrastructure, that make it more flexible, and so on. And of course, we tend also to give a little bit of a roadmap of a forecast for the development of this solution in the future. So we start to see what is going to happen in 12, 18 months from now, what you can expect from the vendors. Okay, and so what you get is very simple. So you have a lot of features that now are common to everybody. I mean, everybody has a scale out solution. Yes, it's no longer important if you get in a software only or appliance, because it's just a way to deploy it. It's not a difference in, doesn't make any difference at the end of the day. Okay, the integration with the hypervisor, data protection, data reduction, snapshot. I don't know, I don't want to spend too much time. It's just think about it, it's too much from my point of view. But then there are other features. Okay, what does make the difference for you today? Okay, integration with the cloud, integration with the edge. Yes. Okay, everybody is as organization that in a way or the other has have to act to deal with the cloud somehow. Everybody is starting to think at edge applications where they have distributed organizations. So that's important. Analytics, you want to understand what is happening in your system. That's important. Extended storage capability, it may look trivial, but actually consolidating more workloads, files, and other things without buying additional storage, that makes sense. How the hypervisors are supported in your platform, again, data protection, again. These are important aspects of a modern HCI solution, and they make a difference. And then there are, some long-term shots, some long-term functionality that you may be interested to know that they are coming. I mean, you are not interested today, but actually in the future they will make a difference on how you design your data center, the kind of services that you can provide to your user, and so on. So this is more or less the map that you can have for HCI and more in general for any technology that we analyze at GigaOm Research. Craig, do you have an opinion on this? Do you see the market and user more or less align with this kind of vision?
I think I do. I mean, I think the framework of it's perfect, right? I mean, to kind of understand when you go out to the market to look for solutions, here are the things you should be looking at with a kind of a, I don't know, more fine-grained or kind of fine-tooth comb approach to really understand the differences between the solutions when you're looking at them. I will say that while it is a framework that's useful broadly, every individual customer obviously is going to be unique, and everyone's going to have their own view as to what is key to their organization. But I would say focus on the things that are different between the solutions, because as you said, the things that are the same are just table stakes. You just kind of get them. And then I would say in the kind of near term and even beyond, when you're talking to vendors out there about where they're taking their solution, just make sure that it's aligned with with where you see your own organization going and the needs that you have for your own organization. So while container support, as you have on here in the near term, is latest and greatest, and I do expect that it's going to make its way into kind of the key criteria pretty soon, I would say. Not everyone agrees with that. There are definitely people out there that will not require that. And if that's the case for your organization, make sure that you're aligning with a vendor that kind of serves your segment of the market. Right. So if you're an SMB, talk to companies that are focused on SMBs. If you're enterprise, talk with vendors that are focused on enterprise. And I would say doing that is going to kind of help make sure, and I can tell you this as a product manager, when I'm looking out there at what features we're going to bring to market, I'm first trying to qualify those features based on who it is we're targeting to make sure that it aligns with what it is they want and not the broader market.
Yes, indeed. And Rod, what is your point of view from the managed service provider, aspect?
Sure. I think one of the things that sometimes we see customers lack in their decision-making process is both the key criteria and near-term considerations. We often see them, thinking of hyperconvergence as a replacement for their virtual infrastructure today and kind of a lift and shift sort of mentality. But I think it's really important to consider the key criteria and the near-term considerations as you move forward. Where is your organization going to be? How can you leverage analytics? How can you leverage serverless computing or container support? And container support has definitely come up in conversations recently. So even in the small to medium-sized business, that topic is one that is showing some interest.
Very good. And there is another thing that I think is important when it's time to evaluate a new technology. Okay, so on one side of this table, you see all the features that we mentioned as key criteria, and on the other side, you have important metrics that define different aspects of your infrastructure. Okay, scalability, feature set, ease of use, flexibility, the ecosystem, and TCO. Okay, they are all important, but actually, it really depends on your organization. It really depends on how you evaluate different things and how you weight them. For example, if we take edge core cloud integration, okay, of course, a good edge core cloud integration gives you a very high flexibility, and it means that you can, deploy your solution in different ways. You have options for the futures and so on. But actually, if your organization is rigid, I mean, if you're buying an infrastructure and you will stay the same infrastructure forever because you're buying it for running an application that doesn't change, and you already know that, and it's not something that you really care about, okay, and flexibility is not your point, maybe edge and core and cloud integration is not the most important thing for you, okay? So the value that this kind of functionality brings to your organization is limited, and the impact that it has on the overall infrastructure is of course limited again. And the same goes for other features, okay? How do you value multi-hypervisor support? Okay, from the feature set standpoint, I mean, I can do whatever I want. Yes, it's great because I can support several hypervisors, meaning I have more options, and again, it's cool. But if you think at day-to-day use, especially if you are a small, medium business company, for example, do you really care to support 3 or 4 hypervisors? Probably not. Okay, so it's much more important for you to have ease of use. In fact, in this example, having multi-hypervisor support limits your ease of use and the manageability of the entire infrastructure, because the integration between the hypervisor and the rest of the components of your hyperconverged solution is limited. Okay, so it really depends on your organization, and the same goes for other aspects of the infrastructure. So again, yes, having great data protection, it improves ease of use, but does it mean that the system is more scalable? Not at all. Okay, so if you are looking at pure scalability and you already have a data protection solution in place, maybe this is not a game changer for you. Okay, so all different aspects should be considered always in when compared against your organizations. Okay, and I don't know, Rod, if you have any thought on this. I mean, if there are different features, you mentioned SMB earlier, so and you probably already know that SMB and enterprises have different metrics, right?
Absolutely. For example, multi-hypervisor support, not really important in the small to medium-sized business market. In fact, one of the key criteria is simplification. So moving away from simplification, would be a downside. And data protection is on the very high side. So I think, prioritizing, like you've kind of laid out here, the different criteria is really important when you go to set your selection criteria for the next platform that is essentially going to provide the core functionality of your organization.
Very good. And Greg, what is your opinion?
Well, this is exactly what I was trying to get at that last slide. Even I think everybody's unique, and to be able to kind of lay your own priorities against this framework is really useful. Yeah, the SMB is going to be different than a large enterprise, which is going to be different than even a medium enterprise with several locations. And kind of make sure that you are really assessing this based on what your actual needs are and where you see your organization going versus the broader market, I would say.
Good. So again, and I hope that this time we will be able to share your opinions. So what is the most important metric for you looking at your organization and look at your current infrastructure? Scalability of the infrastructure, feature set, ease of use of manageability, flexibility, and solution ecosystem. Okay, and let's start with this poll and see what happens this time. So please respond as soon as we get the answers. We will share them again. For me, in my personal experience, okay, the most important thing with small, medium enterprises is ease of use. I mean, I'm talking about, I live in Italy, so it's full of small enterprises here, and not a lot of people, not a lot of organization have a full staffed IT department, okay? Meaning the same guy does a little bit of everything. Even if there are 2 or 3 in the same organization, they are overwhelmed with, PCs, printers, servers, any kind of service. So they want something that is, almost that just works. I mean, they don't want to pay too much attention to the infrastructure. I don't know, but in larger organization, flexibility is and the solution ecosystem are the most important things. And Rod, maybe I can start with you. What's your experience with your customer? You have plenty of customers using this infrastructures.
Yeah, ease of use and manageability are really high on the list. Scalability, pretty much any hyperconverged infrastructure vendor today has really good scalability. As we've kind of discussed already, the feature set, they're very similar. Sure, some vendors have more features than others, but one of the things about this marketplace is if you just wait 6 months, you don't have it today, you probably will. And then the solution ecosystem, I would say that is important, for data protection purposes, for cloud connectivity, hybrid configuration. So while it doesn't play real high in the small to medium-sized market, so the ecosystem does become a point of discussion.
Very good. And Greg?
Yeah, ease of use. Well, it looks like I agree with the audience here. Ease of use, manageability is going to be number one. Honestly, if there was one thing I think missing from this poll that tends to come up in most of the win and loss calls that I do as part of our group in product management at scale, is total cost of ownership comes up in almost every deal. It's let's evaluate the feature set and make sure that the ecosystem exists and it has the right flexibility and everything. But when it comes down to it, at kind of the end of the day, somebody actually has to sign off on this purchase. And so being able to justify those differences in price between different solutions often becomes one of the top priorities.
And yes, and this poll confirms what we thought. I mean, ease of use is the first for the audience, and the runner-ups are flexibility and solution ecosystem. Scalability comes fourth. I mean, and it's okay because probably everybody thinks that that's a scale-out solution is scalable, just because the type of technology and feature set, and nobody's interested in it. I mean, probably they want something that, as we said, just works. And this is something that we find in a lot of occasions. So let's go on with the presentation and see. Let's start a little bit about each single feature that are critical today. Okay. The first thing we mentioned is edge core cloud integration. What does it mean? From my point of view, there are 2 ways to do this. On one side, you can have, your infrastructure at the core that can integrate with the cloud or edge with different services and different types of deployment. For example, you can have only the storage layer on the cloud, okay, and not the same hypervisor, the same everything, and you are able to transfer data, to replicate data to the cloud, and maybe you can use it as a backup option or a remote replication option, data distribution option, whatever you want. But actually, to run the same application on the cloud, you need a conversion because maybe you are using Amazon or Google or Azure, so the virtual machine images are not compatible. So you have to convert them before using them. Okay, it has an advantage. I mean, it's very, very inexpensive at the end of the day compared to other solutions. But actually, it requires a lot of work, for example, to make the data usable on the cloud. Okay. there are reasons to do that. Sometimes you want to replicate data because, for example, you have to run your big data application on the cloud because you prefer this type of services run on the cloud instead of having your own cluster, for example. But in many cases, it adds some complexity. Okay. Another way to do it is to have the same identical stack replicated to the cloud. Okay. It could cost you a little bit more because, you know, it's a virtualization layer on top of the cloud, but actually you have the same identical functionality. You have the same identical virtual machine. So you just move them, you just replicate them, and they are ready to go. For example, for disaster recovery, this is a good scenario because, of course, you have the ability to replicate your data, and something happens in the core data center, then you can just switch on the virtual machine and start giving your service again. Okay. On the other side, on the edge, okay, why an integration with the edge is important? It's not the same stack deployed in a smaller package. Yes, okay, but it's very important to have a couple of things. One, the ability to run in very small configuration, and the other is to manage everything from a single pane of glass. I mean, if you have hundreds of installation across the world, you don't want to have a management console for each one of them. You want a single console for all your infrastructure. Okay, so this is why these functionalities are really important, and this is why you need to check on them, because if you have a distributed organization, if you have the idea to have a cloud as a secondary data center, as an extension of your data center, an hybrid cloud strategy, then you have to check these functionalities. Okay. Rod, maybe you can, as a managed service provider, you can give your opinion how your customer using this kind of functionality with you, or integrating with you and their edge locations, for example.
Sure. Well, one of the great things about Scale Computing's platform is that they have a feature called Cloud Unity, which integrates with Google's cloud. Now, we've deployed it several times, and one of the things that came up in discussions were such as, well, we're a Microsoft shop, we're using Azure today, we don't really want to have to learn the Google Cloud and things like that. Well, interestingly enough, when you go to deploy Cloud Unity, you'll work with Scale Computing's support team, and it's literally completely transparent. You don't really need to know anything about Google's cloud. It simply looks like another Scale node running in the cloud, and you manage it exactly the same way you would manage a on-premise physical appliance. So that deployment model works really well. Again, sort of leaning toward that principle of simplification and easy management.
And Craig, of course, you're one of the guys that build this functionality, so you have a similar opinion, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share the exact same opinion as Rob. But no, I think most of your listeners probably don't want to hear me brag about the product specifically. I will say, it just in general terms around what I'm seeing in the market. I mean, the 2010s were really all about cloud first, cloud, and I think what people have realized over time is either due to regulation or latency concerns, or kind of even something as simple as the autonomy of having to be able to run without an internet connection that's consistent. People have required to have on-premises infrastructure, and so this story of edge, core, cloud, how do we make these three things work together is crucial to the future of what I think infrastructure needs to look like for HCI in general. Some of the more unique workloads that I'm seeing are things like artificial intelligence and machine learning at the edge, where you're processing a whole bunch of data that there's just not a pipe large enough to send that data up to a Google or an Amazon or an Azure. So that data has to be housed locally and be able to process that information with the lowest latency possible to actually make real-time decisions. And so some kind of cooler applications that I've seen allow that to be run on premises with an HCI stack like HC3, running like an IoT gateway that's just sending the relevant events back to the centralized spot for later processing. Those types of models, I think, are going to be more and more prevalent over the coming years.
Very good. And so in our list, we also have analytics. Oh, sorry. So analytics meaning having the ability to understand what is happening in the platform. Okay, this helps you to understand if everything is working right. Capacity planning, so you can analyze trends, see if you need to buy more hardware, more resources for your cluster, and so on. It's a way for most of the system administrators out there to analyze issues before they become real problems. Okay, and take action according to what you see happening in the system. I mean, you rather told me that you are serving hundreds of customers per year. How analytics is important for them? How having a broad, set of analytics features helps your customers?
Sure. Well, one of the key criteria is probably storage management. Amongst all the resource management you might need, storage management becomes really important. Scale Computing's done a great job providing some dashboard reporting around storage management, for example. Of all the systems that we've sold, we monitor and manage probably 90% of them because they're a managed services customer. So we're effectively their IT department. And the responsibility for maintaining the uptime on those scale nodes falls to KT Connections. So at least from a high level, basic analytics is important. Sometimes you can get a little bit too much in the weeds. You can be overwhelmed with the data, and that's not a good situation either. And I think they've found a pretty good balance.
Very good. And there is another, so you mentioned storage, and it's another thing that I think it's really important. I mean, HCI is becoming the center of many data centers. I mean, the core of many data centers from the infrastructure point of view. We are consolidating more and more workloads, we said, but actually sometimes it's very tough to remove some of the physical servers. At the same time, you don't want to buy a new storage network or a new NAS. Okay, so having additional features from the storage point of view, so having the ability to share storage resources to external nodes, it's not bad. I mean, you can save money because you don't need to maintain additional storage resources. You don't need to buy them. You can consolidate more and more on the same infrastructure. And so it's a simplification. And with this, I mean, having ability to not only serve virtual machines that are in your infrastructure, but also provide block, file, and object storage services to external machine. I know that object storage is not really common, so most of the time it's provided through a gateway or through a virtual machine that has an object store installed on it. But actually, block and files are more common, and this helps to decrease the investment in other types of storage infrastructures. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that extended storage capabilities is definitely important. As you scale out your solution to meet the demands of a growing business, having that capability is really important. We've been lucky with Scale Computing in that they offer numerous models, everything from probably a 2 terabyte, maybe even up to over 100 terabyte models in their appliance list. And any one of those can be added to an existing cluster. So that makes it really simple. It's not something where you have to understand what is iSCSI, how do I assign LUNs and things like that, my paths to integrate the storage, to provide redundancy and things like that. It's all built in. You just add another node to the cluster.
Yeah. And then there is another feature that we consider very important here at GigaOm, which is multi-hypervisor support. As we said, multi-hypervisor support is a double-edged sword. Okay, so on one side, you have the ability to support multiple hypervisor. This is in large organization. It's a good box to check. I mean, if you maybe have different contracts with Microsoft, with VMware, maybe with other providers, and you want to have a flexibility of your hyperconverged infrastructure. But actually, okay, there are a couple of trade-offs. One is complexity. You add additional complexity on the management, so you can't have the same level of integration between especially the storage layer and the hypervisor. Okay, and the other one, which is almost the same thing, but actually it's more complex for UIT manager it's less manageable. It's not as easy to use as other platforms that prefer to stick on a single hypervisor support. I know that scale computing has a lot to say on this. I mean, Greg, you made some choices at the very beginning of the design process of HC3s, right?
Yeah, that's right. At the time, going back 10 years, people looked at us like we were crazy because we were at the time using KVM, obviously an open source based hypervisor, to base our own hypervisor on, rather than using the 800-pound gorilla of VMware. And so over time, what that's proven though is because we're able to integrate with the hypervisor directly without using as a kind of a third-party hypervisor. It really gives us a couple things. One is, as you mentioned, ease of use. It's completely abstracted. If you ever actually have a chance to see a demo of the product, you won't even see the hypervisor in there. It's purely just you're carving up resources for workloads, and it's super simple to use. But the other end of it is that it allows us to very efficiently integrate with the hypervisor in such a way that we don't require the RAM or CPU overhead that you would with most of the competitors out there in the market. So because of that, it means a couple things. One is performance is pretty impressive. You can get really low latencies and kind of high IOPS for the direct integration we have. But where I think it actually hits kind of more close to home is in use cases like edge computing, where every dollar you're spending is multiplied across hundreds of sites. So when you're talking, 20 gig, 30 gig, 40 gig of memory, and having to apply that on every single node and every single cluster that you're deploying out across hundreds of sites, that adds up into real dollars, where the total cost of ownership really is driven down by our efficient use of the storage layer we've created. So I would say that those are really the kind of two ends of the spectrum of why we chose that originally, and it's really paid off over the years.
Okay, very good. And last but not least, for me, data protection services are really important. I mean, having data protection services integrating, backup, restore, disaster recovery, these kind of things integrated in the hyperconverged infrastructure is important for simplicity. I mean, it's integrated, easy to use. Probably you can select your virtual machine or group of virtual machine, apply a policy, okay, the same user interface that you use for everything else. And, especially on small, medium businesses, when, again, you don't have a lot of people managing the infrastructure, this is a lot of, this means a lot of savings. You don't need an external backup software, you don't need an external disaster recovery or replication software, and at the end of the day you can work in a single platform for everything that is infrastructure. Okay, so yes, of course, the larger organization, for several reasons, many of them already have in place other solutions that maybe they have them since forever, and in this case it's important to have an integration between the hypervisor, the storage layer, and the data protection platform. This is very important because maybe it's the data protection service that you get from the hypervisor, the hyperconverged platform is really focused on the hypervisor itself, while if you get an external solution, you can back up many other services and other things that you have in the data center, and maybe you can add additional functionalities. Ransomware protection is one of the many reasons for which you may be interested in having a much more sophisticated solution there. Rod, how do you back up your scale computing system usually?
Sure. Well, Scale's done a good job building out the ecosystem. They partnered with Acronis for data protection services. We've got that in place in a few customers. We also use Veeam in a few cases. But built into the product is snapshotting down to like 15 minutes, maybe even less, and replication of those snapshots offsite. And we've used that numerous times to provide recovery services for customers. So whether it's ransomware or a single file that got deleted accidentally, the built-in capabilities have proven extremely effective.
Very good. And so with this, we ended the section about the key criteria. But what is coming in the hyperconvergence world? What are the vendors working on in this moment? So one is containers. We are talking containers everywhere now, Kubernetes, all these kind of things. Okay, why it is important? Okay, it is not important for everybody. I mean, yes, there are a lot of people talking to Kubernetes, and many organizations are deploying Kubernetes now, and most of them are deploying it in development. They are still not in production. So you still have time if you didn't do it yet. But it's interesting to see that as it happened for hyperconvergence, for virtualization in the past, containers is a further optimization on how you develop, deploy, and manage applications. So you will see more and more of this in the future. So hyperconverged vendors are working to support containers on their platforms natively in the future. Okay, and another thing that is becoming important and relevant is serverless computing. So in this world of microservices and containers is built to run microservices better than any other system. Now we have also serverless. Serverless is or function as a service is a way to build small pieces of code that are triggered by events. Okay, so everything that happens in your infrastructure, okay, in your storage system, sometimes in your database, can trigger a simple piece of code, and you can run basic functionalities very quickly. This is used now mostly on from developers and in the cloud computing environment, but actually we are trying to replicating similar processes on premises. You can see many object stores, for example, using this kind of functionalities now, and more parts of the infrastructure are adopting this concept. And last but not least, composability, or more easily, NVMe over Fabric. NVMe is a new technology to access flash memory drives. Okay, it's a protocol, and it unleash all the parallelism and all the performance of this media. Okay, so it's faster, less latency, and at the end of the day, it's managed better than with traditional environments. With traditional protocols. What NVMe over Fabric does it's adding the possibility to have all of this over fabric, I mean over the network, and this means that you can have a device installed in a remote server that can be accessed from a local server, and this opens up a lot of possibility on how to re-architect the storage layers that is distributed across the nodes that you have today. Maybe this is a question for you, Craig. So how do you see the future of hyperconvergence and the future of scale computers in this regard?
Well, I do think that the kind of things you have listed on here are accurate. I mean, containers especially is probably even more near term than some of the others, mainly because we're starting to see, DevOps and other use cases where people are bringing that in-house. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that those applications will have to run next to the legacy applications, legacy meaning virtual machines, for quite a time to come. I mean, especially in an enterprise where it may take 10 years or so for a specific application to actually be put out of its misery whenever that day comes. But the entire time that legacy application is running, it's likely going to have to live right alongside some of these containers, whether that is natively or today. A lot of the hyperconverged vendors are just offering that within a VM, which provides still a lot of the benefits, but not as many as running natively, I would say. The composability, I think, is another one that's it's definitely a buzzword that you're going to read about a lot out in the industry, and we'll see more and more of that come into the HCI space and across all the vendors, really. The thing that I'm hearing more than anything as it comes to that, it's really about I just ordered NVMe for my laptop. Why can't I use that in my clusters? And if I'm going to use my clusters, how do I make sure that I'm getting the lowest latency across the backplane? Usually when that second write or third write has to go across the backplane. So that's usually where I'm hearing that come up on my end.
Okay, very good. So we are a little bit late, and I want to give you the opportunity to share your opinion on the key criteria. So what are the most important criteria for your next hyperconverged infrastructure? Edge core cloud integration, analytics, extended storage capabilities, multi-hypervisor support, and data protection services. So let's start with this poll, and as soon as we get your answers, I will share them with you, and we will end up with a few questions that we got during the I lost them. Here are the questions. Okay, so I have 3 questions here ready, and if you want to add more, please let me know. Wow, you were quick. So the results are ready. Let's see if we can have. So Edge core cloud integration took the first place with 63, and followed by all the others more or less in equal parts. I mean, yes, of course, Edge core cloud. I mean, everybody's building some hybrid cloud infrastructure, and this is why we see this. We see this every day at GigaOm, so it's a good confirmation about it. So let's continue with the questions. The first question I got is how long is the lifespan of an hyperconverged infrastructure? This is a very good question. I mean, we are talking about scale out, and we didn't talk too much about the table stakes, but because this is a scale out and we are working in a modern world, IT world, I give for granted that every vendor, give me the possibility now to expand my cluster and mix nodes in the same cluster. So instead of expanding an old node or replacing an old node, I can add new nodes to the cluster. Okay, it's just easier. I mean, even if the CPU is for 3-4 years ago, and maybe I can run only a bunch of virtual machines, the new server will be bigger with more resources, and I will have more virtual machine on it, and that's it. Easy as hyperconvergence should be. Okay, I don't know if I talked too much here, but Greg, I think that also scale computing supports this kind of functionality. I mean, mixing node of different generations.
Yeah, mixing nodes of different generations, mixing nodes of different, RAM and storage sizes. There's certain rules that will kind of help you apply to make sure you're not orphaning space or anything, but it's pretty broad in terms of being able to mix and match. I've got customers that were with us 10 years ago when we first launched this thing, running that with software-only support today, alongside other nodes that, they've gone from Broadwell to Skylake, now to Cascade Lake, and be with us through the future of, as Intel continues to come up with newer, greater, faster CPUs.
And another question that came in was along the same line. I mean, can I mix nodes of different hardware generation? Yes, we already answered this. And how does it impact performance? I mean, of course, mixing node of different generations is something that you can do, but do not expect to have the consistent latency. For example, if you are mixing an all hard drive nodes with an all flash nodes. Okay, so you will see some discrepancy on the latency, for example. Okay, but doesn't mean that if you balance your architecture since the beginning, for example, with hybrid nodes, and then you expand with all flash nodes, so the difference is not that much. Maybe the evolution of the cluster will be more smooth. I don't know, Craig, if you have any specific functionality to avoid this kind of scenarios, but this is pretty common also with other hyperconverged solutions.
Yeah, no, and that's common with us too. I mean, the idea is that you'll be able to just buy what you need today and then scale out from there by adding additional nodes. The rules typically are that you never want to add a single node that's larger than any pool within that node is larger than the existing pool within the cluster. So by adding in pairs, a lot of times you can just avoid all of that concern entirely from orphaning space. And when it comes to performance, mixing Intel generations means that we kind of have to use the lowest common denominator for flags we're passing through. But if you're running on that today and you're adding newer things, you're not going to see any performance difference from a newer node being added in. You just may not be able to have access to the newer, greater flags in just that new node. On the storage side of things, again, though, as you said, if you're adding an SSD, an all SSD node to a tiered cluster, you're probably not going to see much of a difference. One thing that's unique to Scale, I think, is that we offer all spinning disk nodes. So a lot of times people will just want to be able to scale out the capacity of that second tier, which is totally doable just by adding another node into the system, and we'll incorporate that with the second tier.
Okay, we have other questions in line, but actually it's very, very late. So Craig probably will answer you in the next following days directly to all these answers. Sorry about that. And last but not least, before leaving you today, I'd like to tell you that we can continue this conversation online. I'm pretty open. You can find me on Twitter. My handle is the initial of my first name, E, and Signoretti. You can find it on Google, E Signoretti, and I'm probably the only IT guy in the world that it's called Enrico Signoretti, so it's easy to find. And Craig and Rod, do you have any Twitter handle or any other social media profile that you can share with us so that people that wants to connect with you and talk about the hyperconvergence can get a little bit of advice or maybe share opinions and such?
Sure.
Yeah,
this is Rod.
Mine's at. Oh, go ahead, Rod.
I was just going to say, probably the best way to get a hold of me, honestly, is just go to ktconnections.com. I'm more than happy to share my experiences as an MSP and a scale partner for several years. And I think that'd be very helpful for any of the attendees that have questions about deployment, configuration, pricing, our experience with their support team, and so forth and so on.
Great. And I'm at Craig Theriac on Twitter. You can also find the At Scale Computing broader one, or check out our website for live chat there. Happy to answer any questions I can, and want to say thank you, Enrico, for hosting us today.
No, thank you guys for your time today, and thank you to all the listeners of this webcast, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.